The high-tech lynching of Clarance Thomas has expanded to his family. First up, I want to talk about the assault on the rule of law because, our republic and everything we believe depends on having a constitutional republic, a Republican form of government. And the Republican form of government, at least in the American system, is contingent at the federal level of having three separate branches, co-equal but independent branches of government: the judiciary, the legislature, and the presidency. Well, the judiciary is supposed to apply the law, hopefully not in an activist way, but the left has decided that the judiciary, because it is applying the law in a neutral way, needs to be destroyed. And namely, they're trying to destroy the Supreme Court with spurious ethics charges against the conservatives on the court, basically making up rules that aren't being making up rules and then accusing justices of violating those rules. So it's complete Alice in Wonderland ethics analysis by the left. And of course, they don't care about the ethics. What they're trying to do is delegitimize the court to make it easier to pack the court, which, as I've discussed, would end the court. Because when you hear court packing, just think about turning the Supreme Court into the equivalent of Congress. Now, do you think that Congress has people have confidence that Congress can fairly apply the law or neutrally apply the law? Of course not. So why would you think that a Supreme Court the size of Congress, with politicians just like congressmen on it, would fairly apply the law? But the left thinks that that's the way they can control the courts by undermining the rule of law and adherence to our Constitution. And the way they're doing that is by trying to make it impossible for justices to remain on the court through abuse and smearing and slander and defamation. And their number one target, and the target's changed from week to week, they've gone after virtually every jurist who has conservative inclinations, everyone from the Chief Justice Roberts to Gorsuch, and of course, the number one target now is Justice Thomas. And I tell you, I've never seen anything like it, to have a series of stories, story after story, targeting Thomas, targeting Roberts, targeting Gorsuch, all about, as I said, these fake ethics concerns. And with Justice Thomas, when he was first nominated, you had these false charges leveled against him with the help of Joe Biden, then a senator, by Anita Hill. And Thomas was having no part of it. He went up there to the Senate and famously testified and complained about the high-tech lynching he was being put through by the media and by the leftist senators there. And it's never stopped, and it's expanded in recent days to target his wife, my friend Ginny Thomas, his 94-year-old mother. They're targeting her. His grandnephew that he was trying to help out and take care of, Justice Thomas and his wife Ginny. The high-tech lynching of Clarance Thomas has expanded to his family. And the most recent attack is the suggestion that a friend of his, who happened to be a billionaire, was improperly subsidizing or giving him gifts that should have been reported to help pay in part for the private school education of his grandnephew. His grandnephew, I guess, was having issues or was in difficult circumstances. So Justice Thomas and Ginny Thomas, and I guess the justice saw himself in his young relative, took him in and helped him out and tried to provide him an education and, gave him the opportunities they thought he needed in order to be successful. And that included private schooling. And they were having trouble, I guess, in the local schools, so the local public schools. So they talked to his friend, Harlan Crow, and he said, well, I went to this great school, you should send him. And he offered to pay the first year of tuition there. And somehow that becomes a reportable gift, even though under the rules, it's not a reportable gift. A, because it's from a friend, and B, it's not because it's not for an immediate family relative like a daughter or a spouse or a son. And but that didn't stop the left-wing activist group that publishes this publication called ProPublica, which, as I said, a left-wing advocacy group, from running a story suggesting he did something wrong when in fact he did nothing wrong. And I'm frustrated because although the Senate did have a hearing, Democrats set up a hearing to try to destroy the Supreme Court earlier this week. The Republicans did a relatively good job pushing back on it, but they're not going to be cowed. The left isn't going to be cowed, as we saw following up on that hearing with this smear of Justice Thomas targeting his grandnephew as well. And a lawyer for Justice Thomas and Ginny Thomas, Mark Paoletta, who happens to be a friend of ours as well, issued a statement. And because the media isn't going to tell you about it, I'm going to read you the statement, because Justice Thomas deserves a defense. And he not only personally deserves a defense because he's an American citizen who's being abused, but he deserves a defense because attacking Justice Thomas is attacking the Supreme Court, the rule of law, and our constitutional system. This is what Mark wrote. It was published on Twitter. We'll put a link to it. The Thomases have rarely spoken publicly about the remarkably generous efforts to help a child in need. They've always respected the privacy of this young man and his family. I guess the guy, his nephew's in his 30s now. It is disappointing and painful, but unsurprising that some journalists and critics cannot do the same. The Thomases quietly and honorably devoted 12 years of their lives to helping a beloved child in desperate need of love, support, and guidance. In 1997, Justice Thomas and his wife brought their great-nephew to live with them. They agreed to take in this young child, much as Justice Thomas's grandparents had done for him and his brother in 1955. Justice Thomas's grandparents changed the trajectory of his life, and the Thomases hope to do the same for a child in need. Justice Thomas and his wife made immeasurable personal financial sacrifices and poured every ounce of their lives and hearts into giving their great-nephew a chance to succeed. In the summer of 2006, the Thomases were struggling to find a school where they could send their great-nephew. In discussing these challenges with their dear friends, Harlan and Kathy Crow, Harlan recommended that the Thomases consider one more option, sending their great-nephew to Randolph-Macon Academy, which is in Virginia. Harlan had attended the school, and he thought that the school would be a good fit. Harlan had financially supported Randolph-Macon since the 1980s and funded scholarships for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Harlan offered to pay the first year of Justice Thomas's grandnephew's tuition in 2006, and that payment went directly to the school. Harlan Crow's office confirmed that he did not pay the great-nephew's tuition for any other year at Randolph-Macon. After some time, the school recommended that the great-nephew attend a boarding school in Georgia for 1 year. Harlan offered to pay the first year tuition for the great-nephew at the Georgia school, and again, those tuition payments went directly to the school. By the next school year, in 2009, the Thomas's great-nephew returned to Randolph-Macon. He moved back to Savannah in December of 2009 after he turned 18. The Thomases love their great-nephew. It is despicable that the press has dragged him into their effort to smear Justice Thomas. This story is another attempt to manufacture a scandal about Justice Thomas, but let's be clear about what is supposedly scandalous now. Justice Thomas and his wife devoted 12 years of their lives to taking in and caring for a beloved child who was not their own, just as Justice Thomas's grandparents had done for him. They made many personal financial sacrifices to do this, and along the way, their friends joined them in doing everything possible to give this child a future. Harlan Crow's tuition payments made directly to these schools on behalf of Justice Thomas's great-nephew did not constitute a reportable gift. Justice Thomas was not required to disclose the tuition payments made directly to Randolph-Macon and the Georgia school on behalf of his great-nephew because the definition of a dependent child under the Ethics in Government Act does not include a great-nephew. It is limited to a son, daughter, stepson, or stepdaughter. Justice Thomas never asked Harlan Crow to pay for his great-nephew's tuition, and neither Harlan Crow nor his company had any business before the Supreme Court. This malicious story shows nothing except for the fact that the Thomases and the Crows are kind, generous, and loving people who tried to help this young man. So that's the story. A wealthy friend of the Thomases helped them pay tuition, directed the monies directly to the school. Under the ethics rules, they weren't required to report the gift, it seems to me, on two levels. A, it wasn't a covered person, meaning the great-nephew wasn't his son, and therefore reportable, the gift was reportable. And secondly, because it was a friend, the gift probably was never generally reportable anyway, even if it could be attributable to something directly to the benefit of Justice Thomas or a direct member of his family. So a lot of noise about nothing, right? But that's not going to stop the left from calling for the impeachment and removal of Thomas. It's not going to stop the left from trying to harass and intimidate the Supreme Court. And remember, they're in the middle of making some very sensitive decisions right now. So this is part of that as well, intimidating the current decision-making of the Supreme Court. So, and as we talked about either last week or a few weeks ago, we have this constant threat of violence that the left has used or is using against the justices of the Supreme Court by illegally protesting outside their homes. Now, I don't know about you, but if someone came to your home, that's a sign to most any sensible person and starts protesting, we know where you live. And sure enough, Justice Kavanaugh, someone showed up outside his home, was near his home, and by his own admission to the police, according to reports, allegedly said he was there to kill him. So Justice Kavanaugh was nearly assassinated, the guy who's charged with attempted murder, as a result of the failures, in my view, of the police and specifically the Garland Justice Department to defend the rule of law, which prohibits this intimidation campaign, which has violence as its basis against the sitting justices. And as Justice Alito said, this leak that took place of the Dobbs decision, made them all targets of assassination. And the Justice Department and the Biden White House not only have done nothing to enforce the law to better protect them, they've encouraged the protests, which, as best I can tell, haven't really stopped. So these are dangerous times for our republic. I say it once, I'll say it again. And when you see these attacks on Justice Thomas or other conservative justices of the Supreme Court, you got to know it's deadly serious. And it's not about ethics at the court level, because they don't care about the ethics of the liberals on the court. And I'm not suggesting any of the liberals, quote, are unethical in terms of what they've done in terms of finances or gift reports and forms and such. I'm just telling you, all discussions, practically speaking, about the Supreme Court and ethics are designed to undermine the legitimacy of the court, are not designed to instill confidence in the fair administration of justice. They're designed to advance the destruction of the Supreme Court, the rule of law, and our constitutional system in a way that could end the country as we know it. And so Judicial Watch is not going to be intimidated. We're not going to back down. We have a lawsuit investigating the failure to provide security and enforce the law for the justices who are under the gun from the left at their homes. And of course, we're educating the public as best we are able and defending the rule of law and defending folks like Justice Thomas against these spurious attacks. And I encourage you to make it a priority when you talk to senators. So what are you doing to defend Justice Thomas? What are you doing to defend the rule of law that's under attack from the left? Because there are a few of the senators who are doing it, but most others don't care much about it. To me, it ought to be a priority. So communicate with your senators by calling 202-225-3121. Same thing goes for the House. There's oversight of the Justice Department out of the House of Representatives as well. These are serious times. And so Judicial Watch isn't going to stop. We're not going to back down, as I said, because we don't want the country to end, to be blunt. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.